can you talk through the whole saga of the Trump's tariffs that's still going on, especially tariffs on China, from your perspective as an economist? To what degree was it justified? To what degree was it effective? To what degree is it bad policy for U.S., for the West, for the world, also for China?
China has been preparing for this for the last 5 years, and for the return of Trump, and for and for Trump's uh, maniac trade policies. You'd think that Trump also had 5 years to prepare for this battle with China. It didn't show. You can say that the Chinese, at least this time around, have played their hand pretty well when dealing with Trump's tariff threats and the trade war. With a level of calibrated assertiveness, they have really thought through everything very elaborately. Look, this is not good for either country. Let's just be clear. It's bad for U.S. and China, and it's bad for the world. And every country has a stake in the U.S.-China trade war, because whether you trade directly or indirectly with China, you're going to be affected. They are one of the largest intermediate exporters in the world, and Chinese manufacturing goods anchor global manufacturing prices. The cumulative tariff burdens, when you get to Canada, when you get to Mexico, when you get to any other final destination, these tariffs will affect you, right? So it's clearly very, very bad for the world. China's core principles, and I think that this is not well understood from the rest of the world towards the U.S., and something that they have kept up is equivalence, reciprocity, and realism. China's not going to lower tariffs unless the U.S. does, right? You can kind of stand up to Trump like a man. That's the only way, to deal with Trump. That's its view. The deal has to be realistic. The phase 1 deal of the last time wasn't realistic, and China thinks, look, the U.S. is going to use this as a leverage, right? That's not possible. This can't be seen as political concession. The deal has to be seen as mutual commerce. So where China can have room to negotiate is opening up things like services. American banks, American financial institutions have a lot of business to do in China. They can buy a limited number of more goods. They can discuss about transparency around rules and regulations on e-commerce, on data. All of that is fine. But don't confound economic issues with political issues. Hong Kong, Taiwan is not part of the deal, by the way, in case anyone was wondering. Trying to change China's state hybrid private sector model, don't go there. Anything that challenges China's technology, security, that's not really part of the discussion. I think that people have to be clear about also what China thinks and wants, and also the Chinese to be clear about what Trump wants, although I don't know anybody, even Trump himself, knows exactly what he wants, in order for these very complex negotiations to actually succeed.
Okay, so China has a few red lines, so don't mention Hong Kong or Taiwan.
Don't mix the political issues with the trade deal.
Right. And then is there some degree maybe you can speak to culturally where stylistically there's red lines, meaning don't bully China, like language-wise? Or does that not matter? Because there's a kind of way of speaking in the United States that, I feel like in diplomacy in general, neither side wants to be humiliated. And in great deals, even when one side on paper wins, you want to make the other side, especially the side that gets the short end of the stick, feel like they've won and show the rest of the world that they're the winner.
Well, that's diplomacy.
That's diplomacy.
We have an absence of diplomacy. But you're absolutely right. There needs to be respect. The Chinese, at least, really care about respect. And I wish there was just a bit more cultural fluency. And I think a lot of things would be so much easier between the two countries, just understanding that. Because you can actually push China to do a lot of things, right? All within reason that would work in favor of the U.S., but understand that respect is vitally important. Face saving is very, very, very important.
To what degree what Xi Jinping says and what they're putting out there in the world represents the truth. So he has a whole way of being of like, let's de-escalate, let's all make good deals together. Let's almost like let's be friend. Like Modi a little bit has a similar way of being. Like let's just, and the implied thing is like, forgive the French, but if you fuck with us, won't be nice. But let's just all be nice together. Well, is he speaking the truth?
Xi Jinping is not Putin, right?
Sure.
And there's a genuine desire on China's part to de-escalate. Again, coming back to the level of pragmatism, under economic strain in China, you don't really want to be picking fights. They don't agree at all with Trump's economic views and world vision, let's just put it simply. So understanding that a lot of this is also driven by American internal politics, which they are aware of, helps a bit. But there's a genuine desire to take the temperature down with the US, even if the weather doesn't fundamentally change.
What does good diplomacy look like here for both sides? Like, what is the best possible on the just strictly on the economics, on the trade, the tariffs? What's the best possible outcome for the world?
I think that Trump can show to the American consumers that he has gotten some sort of a deal, right? That the Chinese have bought more American goods or promised to buy American goods, and then the American companies can come into China, and then a lot of the previously restricted investment opportunities are now not restricted, and the American banks can make money in China. He can say that. And I think that could be part of a really realistic deal. That somehow American companies will be better protected through IP protection. And again, that's in China's interest as well. So I don't see a fundamental conflict here. And at the same time, they lower the tariffs, right? Not to the rates where they were before, but lower, and you don't prohibit trade. And then for China, that would also be a success. So you can actually have success for both places, but being realistic is part of the game.
Is tariffs, question to you as an economist, is tariffs a useful, effective tool for global trade?
No. I think that there is a real problem in global trading system and globalization in general that is not going to be resolved by tariffs. We do need to think about more harmony between countries, where, let's say, not one country dominates. And here I'd push back on China and say, yes, you have amazing companies and competitive companies, but you just can't dominate in everything. That would not be good for global harmony. You need to give other countries an opportunity. You need to develop your own internal economy, right? Rely on your consumers as part of the deal. Tariffs, this kind of highly protectionist method, is very distortionary, and it's going to be bad for the US. I'd actually argue that both China and the US have totally taken advantage and also enjoyed the global economic realm under the US liberal order. I think that China quite likes it, actually. You know, US kept peace, and during this peaceful times, things were working very well economically, technologically. They kept the sea lanes open. They did their part to preserve peace to the extent they can, I guess. But China wants peace, right? Only with peace can they do what they can. And actually, US, despite saying they've been victimized, look, they've had a very, very good time. Right? Never have quality of life, standards of living, technology risen as much as the US did under its own liberal order than it has ever before. And the amount of influence and power. Yes, of course, you can blame the US for lots of things that happened, but it actually had a really good time, and China as well. So now they're going to take this apart. They think that they're going to be somehow better off, that American people and Chinese people are going to be better off under a more disorderly, fragmented, rule of a jungle kind of world. That's an illusion. That's what politicians tell their people, but that's not the truth.
So what are, if not tariffs, ways to incentivize countries like the United States to build internally? So to build semiconductor chips internally, for example.
Well, exactly. Tariffs is a way to punish foreigners, but what you really want to do is to strengthen your own domestic competitiveness. And I want to draw an analogy to the US Japan competition in the 1980s. Uh, Japan actually took over in many parts of the semiconductors industry, even though the microchip was invented in the US. But guess what happened? Well, it actually drove more competition and more mobilization in the US, actually creating this innovation system, changed a few really critical laws that helped with US innovation, and the consumers benefited. The US took over again as the leader of the semiconductors industry. There's no better way than to strengthen yourself to be competitive, because ultimately, tariffs have not done anything to help the US. The trade deficits have widened since Trump, right? They haven't closed the imbalance with China and with the rest of the world, because ultimately the US saves less than it invests. And that's a macro phenomenon. It's not a trade phenomenon. But I fear that the US, by kind of dropping off of this global trading network and system, it will lose more and more of its power. You have power when you're deeply engaged and embedded with a country. Once you've left it, you actually lose any sort of leverage.
So there's got to be ways to incentivize industrial policy, building more stuff internally without tariffs, right? So you just invest from a federal perspective. You've invest in companies, maybe like more carrot towards the domestic versus stick versus the foreigner.
All kinds of subsidies that are justified for the green transition, for innovation, R&D, support for the university system. You know, the US is the world leader in terms of attracting talent, it has everything going for it. But it was a little bit complacent, and by dropping off of that global network, it's going to do itself more disservice.
Yeah, tariffs don't quite make sense to me, or maybe I'm dumb, but it just doesn't make.
It doesn't make sense to economists either, and economists are not all dumb.